Welcome back to the deep dive. Get ready, because today we're taking a seriously deep dive into one of the most electrifying, controversial, and downright complex figures of our time. We've got a stack of sources here, articles, research papers, personal accounts, even a detailed report outline, all focused on the one and only Mike Tyson.
That's right. Our mission for this deep dive is to cut through the noise, the headlines, the sensationalism, and really navigate the extreme highs and the equally profound lows of his life. We want to understand not just the events, but the deeper forces at play, from his raw beginnings on the streets of Brooklyn to the unexpected transformations he's undergone. We're extracting the most important insights from these sources to give you a shortcut to understanding this incredible saga.
It's a story that just defies simple categories. It's about unbelievable power, yes, but also profound vulnerability, deep controversy, moments of sheer destruction, and surprisingly immense resilience and this capacity for reinvention. It's definitely not a linear story, it's a wild ride. So grab hold, let's unpack this.
To truly understand Mike Tyson, the sources really insist you have to start at the very beginning, in the crucible of his early life in Brooklyn. Michael Gerard Tyson was born on June 30, 1966, in Fort Greene, and his immediate environment was, well, incredibly challenging.
We're talking about a foundational void here, really. His mother, Lorna Mae Tyson, is described in the sources as struggling with alcoholism and possibly involved in prostitution. And there's just this absence of a stable father figure. His biological father, Purcell Tyson, he is a cab driver but largely absent. And then a paternal figure early on, Jimmy Kirkpatrick, he also left.
Absolutely. That lack of consistent, positive adult guidance and stability right from the start is highlighted in the sources as a critical factor. And things didn't get any easier. When he was just 10 years old, the family moved to the Brownsville neighborhood. Now, Brownsville at that time was notorious for its high crime rates and deep poverty. The sources really emphasized the crushing weight of financial burdens his mother faced just trying to keep the family afloat in that environment.
So, picture this. A young boy growing up in this unstable home, surrounded by the harsh realities of poverty and crime. This wasn't exactly a supportive, nurturing world he was stepping into.
Far from it. And, contrary to the image of Iron Mike we know today, young Mike was described as being small for his age, shy, with a noticeable lisp and a high-pitched voice. This made him an easy target on those tough streets. He was, unfortunately, bullied relentlessly.
And this constant torment, it must have built something up inside him. The sources point to a specific, really pivotal incident that unlocked a different kind of response, almost a turning point. It's the story of the pigeon.
Ah, yes, the pigeons. He had this deep affection for these birds. They were one of the few sources of solace and connection for him, it seems. And when an older youth deliberately killed one of his beloved pigeons right in front of him, something just snapped.
His rage, built up from years of being targeted and feeling powerless, it just exploded in that moment. He physically attacked the older youth. And the revelation wasn't just about the violence itself, but the effect it had. He discovered that his fists commanded respect. They instilled fear in others, something he hadn't experienced before as the shy, bullied kid.
Right. And the sources frame this not just as a single act of violence, but as the emergence of this fierce protectiveness, a willingness to unleash overwhelming force against disrespect or perceived threats. It became a life pattern, didn't it? Sometimes justified, often tragically not.
Yeah, that pattern definitely recurs.
This aggressive street fighting style, honed by necessity, quickly transitioned into involvement with local crime. Around age 11, she became affiliated with a gang called the Jolly Stompers, starting with petty crimes like robbing cash registers.
And it escalated frighteningly fast. By the age of 13, the sources indicate he had been arrested more than 30 times, some sources even pushing that number up to 38 arrests before he even hit his teens.
Think about that. A 13-year-old with over 36 arrests. The sources are careful to present this gang involvement not just as simple delinquency, but as a desperate search for belonging. For a boy who lacked structure, lacking that father figure, the gang offered a perverse semblance of a surrogate family, a place where he felt accepted and, powerful.
It gave him agency, maybe, in a world that felt out of control.
Exactly. It gave him agency in a world that otherwise felt completely out of control. His mother reportedly saw new clothes that she knew I didn't pay for, recognizing them as the illicit rewards, the tangible, albeit corrupt benefits of this new affiliation.
This path, almost inevitably, led him into the juvenile justice system. He spent time at Spofford Juvenile Center in the Bronx, a place he later described in pretty harrowing terms, calling it a rat-infested hellhole.
Yeah, and his aggressive behavior didn't stop at Spofford's gates. He was involved in dorm fights, was caught with a knife, and even suffered a beating from a guard there. The raw, untamed aggression was still very much present.
But even in that bleak environment, a seed was planted that would eventually sprout in an unexpected direction. The sources highlight a significant event, a visit from Muhammad Ali.
Right. Imagine being a troubled kid in a place like Spofford, and Muhammad Ali, the global icon, walks in. Ali spoke to the boys, sharing stories of his own struggles. The sources note that Tyson at this point wasn't a boxing fan. He was actually more interested in professional wrestling.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but Ali's presence, his fame, the adulation he received, the sheer respect he commanded, that was a game changer. It wasn't the sport itself that initially resonated, but the status Ali represented. It ignited this powerful yearning in Tyson for that same level of fame, adulation, and respect.
That's a really critical distinction the sources make. It wasn't about the craft of boxing yet, but the outcome of mastering something that could lift you to that level.
Precisely. And eventually, Tyson was transferred to the Tryon School for Boys in upstate New York, which was considered a significant improvement over Spofford. But as you'd expect, his aggressive reputation followed him. He was known initially as Mike Tyson, the psycho-crazy guy, due to his continued volatile behavior towards other boys and staff.
But here's where the structure he seemed to crave began to appear, channeled through boxing. His innate fighting ability was recognized by Bobby Stewart, a counselor at Tryon who was also a former amateur boxer.
Right. And Tyson, perhaps fueled by that flicker of desire sparked by Ali, was persistent. He kept approaching Stewart, declaring, "I want to be a fighter." Stewart was initially skeptical, telling him that real fighters wouldn't end up in such a place.
Understandable skepticism.
Yeah, but Tyson's relentless insistence, coupled with a promise to genuinely change his behavior and apply himself in school, eventually convinced Stewart to work with him.
And Stewart became this absolutely vital early mentor. The sources highlight one particular act by Stewart that was incredibly significant. Tyson struggled with reading and writing, leading the system to label him borderline retarded in his file. Stewart challenged this. He argued that Tyson wasn't lacking intelligence, he was simply uneducated, a product of his environment.
Wow. That act of advocacy, of seeing past the system's label and recognizing his potential intelligence despite the lack of formal education, that must have been crucial validation for a boy who had felt dismissed his entire life.
Absolutely.
The sources suggest this likely significantly bolstered Tyson's self-worth at a truly critical juncture. It made him more receptive to Stewart's efforts to channel his raw aggression into the discipline of boxing, laying the essential physical and mental groundwork for what was to come. Stewart's role was foundational, really, making Tyson ready for the even more intensive, life-altering mentorship that would define his early career.
And that groundwork led him directly to the man who would become the most dominant force in shaping his destiny, Cus D'Amato.
Yeah. Seeing Tyson's raw, terrifying talent, but fearing he would simply return to the life of crime he'd known in Brooklyn upon his release, Bobby Stewart made a pivotal decision in 1980. He introduced the 13 or 14-year-old Tyson to the legendary boxing manager and trainer, Cus D'Amato.
Cus was a revered figure, wasn't he? Known for guiding Floyd Patterson to the heavyweight title. By the 1980s, he was living somewhat removed, running a gym in Catskill, New York, notably situated above a police station.
That's right. The sources described the first meeting between the young, volatile teenager and the aging, intense trainer as profound. D'Amato had this quiet, intimidating presence that immediately commanded Tyson's attention and respect. And after watching Tyson spar for just a short time, Cus delivered what would become a famous, almost mythical prophecy.
The line that changed everything for Tyson.
Exactly. Barring outside distractions, Cus declared, looking at this powerful, troubled kid, that is the heavyweight champion of the world and possibly the universe. The sources recount how hearing this unwavering belief from a man like D'Amato brought Tyson to tears. It instilled in him an immediate, powerful sense of purpose, something he'd never truly had before.
Cus didn't just become his trainer, he became his world, didn't he? He was the dominant, stable male figure Tyson had desperately lacked. He provided a home, discipline, and a psychological framework for channeling his aggression and understanding fear.
And when Tyson's mother died tragically in 1982, when he was only 16, Cus became his legal guardian, fully integrating him into his life. Tyson himself spoke extensively about their bond, describing it as a true father-son relationship. He saw their shared pursuit of the championship as a grand escapade, like pirates on a great adventure, fighting the world together. Cus's influence extended far beyond the ring, too. He was instrumental in Tyson's education, teaching him to read and write, opening up a whole new world of knowledge. He also emphasized the psychological aspect of fighting, teaching Tyson that he needed to fight his demons as much as his opponents.
So Cus was really the architect of Iron Mike, crafting the fighter and the whole persona.
The sources definitely paint him that way, carefully crafting not just the devastating fighting style, but the aura of invincibility and intimidation that would become his calling card.
Under D'Amato's wing, Tyson's life became completely structured around boxing. His days were meticulously planned. He even attended Catskill High initially, though the sources note he was later expelled for erratic, often violent behavior, which is telling, isn't it? Even under Cus's discipline, the underlying volatility was still present.
That's a key point. He switched to private tutors, but the core focus was always on intensive evening boxing practice. Cus strategically guided him through amateur fights and informal sessions known as smokers against older, more experienced opponents. This threw Tyson into the deep end, forcing him to adapt and learn under pressure. And central to his training was the adoption of Cus's signature peekaboo boxing style.
Okay, let's break down that style because it became synonymous with Tyson's early dominance.
Sure. The sources describe the peekaboo as a high, tight guard with the gloves held close to the cheeks, combined with constant, relentless bobbing and weaving head movement. This was paired with explosive footwork, designed to get inside an opponent's reach as quickly as possible and then unleash aggressive counterpunches and brutal combinations.
And it was perfectly suited for Tyson, right, being a shorter heavyweight.
Exactly. It turned his reach disadvantage into an advantage, allowing him to negate an opponent's jab and get close enough to utilize his devastating power in tight spaces.
And it wasn't just physical, it was psychological too, that constant movement, the difficulty hitting him cleanly, plus knowing his power was waiting.
Absolutely. It projected an image of an elusive, yet terrifyingly aggressive force. This disciplined training under Cus quickly translated into phenomenal amateur success. He won gold medals in the U.S. Junior Olympics in both 1981 and 1982, and then took gold at the prestigious National Golden Gloves in 1984. His overall amateur record was an impressive 48 wins and 6 losses, with a remarkable 38 knockouts.
There was one notable setback, though, wasn't there?
Yes, despite all that success, he failed to make the 1984 U.S. Olympic team, losing twice to Henry Tillman. It was disappointment for sure, but it underscores that even at that dominant stage, there were still lessons to be learned and opponents who could trouble him. But overall, the foundation for professional greatness was undeniably laid.
And it's important to revisit that point about his expulsion from high school. Even under Cus's seemingly total control, that erratic, often violent behavior suggests that D'Amato's discipline, while effective in the ring, may not have fully addressed the deeper psychological issues or translated into internalized control for life outside of boxing.
And that brings us to what many sources identify as a critical, devastating turning point that occurred right as his professional career was launching, the death of Cus D'Amato in November 1985.
This was so early in his professional ascent. Imagine, just as he's about to hit warp speed to stardom, he loses the only true anchor he's ever had.
It was catastrophic. The sources speculate that Cus's death was the primary catalyst for many of the troubles that followed. Tyson lost everything in one person. His trainer, his manager, his primary mentor, his protector, his surrogate father, his source of stability, his psychological grounding. And just a few years later, his manager, Jimmy Jacobs, also died, leaving Tyson even more isolated and vulnerable.
Connecting this back to his childhood, Cus's paternal presence had seemingly provided a powerful buffer against the deep-seated wounds from his difficult upbringing and the loss of his mother. With Cus gone, those vulnerabilities were just exposed right as he was about to face the overwhelming pressures of unimaginable fame, wealth, and public scrutiny.
Precisely. The sources argue that without D'Amato's moral compass, his astute understanding of the boxing world's sharks, and his ability to provide psychological structure, Tyson became increasingly adrift. He was susceptible to his own worst impulses, the aggression, the lack of control, and easily manipulated by others who sought to exploit his immense talent and growing fame.
Kevin Rooney stepped in as trainer, right?
Yeah.
And Teddy Atlas was involved earlier.
Yeah, Kevin Rooney took over training and had been part of the team, and Teddy Atlas was involved earlier before a pretty volatile split over an incident involving a gun threat regarding an inappropriate advance. But neither could really fill the unique, all-encompassing void left by Cus D'Amato. The stage was set for an unprecedented rise, but also, for potential disaster.
So you have this young man, a product of extreme circumstances, forged in the gym by a legend, possessing terrifying power, but now, without his primary guide, he just exploded onto the professional scene.
And exploded is definitely the right word. Mike Tyson made his professional debut at just 18 years old on March 6, 1985, in Albany, New York. His very first fight set the tone. A first-round technical knockout victory over Hector Mercedes.
He fought with incredible frequency in those early days, didn't he?
Remarkable. The sources note he had 15 bouts in his first year alone, and his knockout power was instantaneous and devastating. He won his first 19 professional fights by knockout, an astounding 12 of those coming in the very first round. Overall, 26 of his first 28 wins were by KO or TKO, with 16 of those occurring in the opening round.
Wow. He wasn't just beating up on nobodies forever, though. The quality of his opposition gradually increased.
Yeah, he progressed from journeyman to legitimate contenders like James Quick, Tillis, J.V. Jocko, Jesse Ferguson, Mitch Blood Green, and Marvis Frazier. His first appearance on national television, ABC Sports, was against Jesse Ferguson in February 1986, where he broke Ferguson's nose on the way to a 6-round stoppage. His corner even successfully argued the initial DQ to a TKO to keep that incredible knockout streak going.
Right, I remember that.
Then in July 1986, he famously wiped out Marvis Frazier, the son of Joe Frazier, in just 30 seconds.
That fight was just jaw-dropping at the time. You simply didn't see that level of destruction against a known name like Frazier.
One fight the sources, and Tyson himself highlight as a real test, despite ending in a stoppage, was against Jose Revolta in August 1986. Tyson knocked Revolta down 3 times, but couldn't put him away for good until the 10th round. Tyson commented afterwards on Revolta's toughness, saying he took everything and kept coming back for more. This relentless string of brutal highlight reel victories captivated the entire public.
He was instantly billed as the next unstoppable force, the savior of the heavyweight division. And the culmination of that meteoric ascent came incredibly quickly.
On November 22, 1986, at the Las Vegas Hilton, Mike Tyson, at the age of just 20 years, 4 months, and 22 days, challenged Trevor Berbick for the WBC Heavyweight Championship.
And he made history, youngest ever.
He didn't just win, he absolutely dominated Berbick, knocking him down multiple times before the referee stopped the fight in the 2nd round. With that victory, Tyson abruptly broke the record, held by Floyd Patterson, another of Cus D'Amato's protégés, to become the youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history. It wasn't just a title change. It signaled a dramatic, fearsome shift in the landscape of the sport.
But he didn't stop there. His next target was unifying the fractured heavyweight titles. The division had multiple champions at the time, right?
Exactly. His goal was undisputed status. On March 7, 1987, he defeated James Bone Crusher Smith for the WBA title by unanimous decision. And then on August 1, 1987, he beat Tony Tucker for the IBF title, also by unanimous decision.
Making him the first heavyweight in history to simultaneously hold the WBC, WBA, and IBF titles, and the only one to unify them in succession in that manner. From August 1987 until February 1990, he was universally recognized as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world.
His dominance during this period was just breathtaking. He made 10 successful defenses during his undisputed reign. He stopped former champion Larry Holmes in 4 rounds in January 1988, but perhaps his most significant and most terrifying performance came on June 27, 1988, against Michael Spinks.
Spinks. He was undefeated and considered by many to be the legitimate lineal champion, someone Tyson needed to beat to truly prove he was the man.
And Tyson didn't just beat him, he absolutely annihilated him in 91 seconds of the first round. It was a devastating knockout that removed any lingering doubt. He was the undisputed lineal champion, the most feared man on the planet.
The speed of this ascent is almost unbelievable. From his professional debut to becoming undisputed world champion took less than 3 years. It's a trajectory unlike almost anything seen in sports history.
And the sources strongly suggest that this incredibly rapid rise, achieved at such a young age, combined with the absence of Cus D'Amato's grounding influence, made him uniquely vulnerable. He was simply not equipped, psychologically or emotionally, to handle the immense fame, the unimaginable wealth, the constant pressure, and the manipulative people suddenly surrounding him.
That lack of grounding, the void left by Cus, it's repeatedly highlighted as crucial in the unraveling that followed.
Exactly. The Iron Mike persona, built on brutal KOs and that aura of invincibility, was at its peak. The sources note that this psychological intimidation factor was a massive part of his success. Many opponents seemed defeated before they even got in the ring, simply by facing the man who seemed indestructible.
But there was a significant downside to maintaining that facade, wasn't there?
Oh, definitely. It created overwhelming expectations and a persona he felt trapped by, one he had to constantly project. The sources argue this stifled his ability to develop as a person and left him incredibly vulnerable to exploitation by those who saw him only as a cash cow, someone to be used.
And that's where the beginning of the end of the Invincible Iron Mike truly kicks off.
The first major crack appeared on February 11, 1990, in Tokyo, Japan. In what remains arguably the greatest upset in sports history, Tyson lost his undisputed title to James "Buster" Douglas, who entered the fight as a monumental 42-1 underdog. Douglas stopped him by knockout in the 10th round.
It wasn't just the fact that he lost, but how he looked in the ring. He appeared sluggish, unprepared, almost listless, didn't he?
Exactly. The sources highlight this loss as far more than just a defeat. It was the first major fissure in that carefully constructed Iron Mike facade, signaling the start of a period of profound personal and professional decline that had arguably been brewing beneath the surface for years. The loss felt less like an opponent beating a peak Tyson and more like Tyson's world collapsing on him inside the ring.
Because parallel to his struggles in the ring, his personal life during this time was in complete chaos. His marriage to actress Robin Givens from 1988 to 1989 was notoriously turbulent and became a media circus, ending in a very public, very costly divorce.
Right. Allegations of physical abuse by Tyson were widely reported, with Givens famously appearing on television with Barbara Walters, describing the marriage as pure hell. This period was also marked by a string of assault and harassment charges filed against Tyson.
And the sources point specifically to his alignment with controversial boxing promoter Don King during this vulnerable period. After the deaths of Cus D'Amato and his manager Jimmy Jacobs, Tyson, adrift and surrounded by people often looking out for their own interests, fell heavily under King's influence.
Yeah, and Tyson would later file lawsuits and publicly accuse King of systematically mismanaging his finances and siphoning off tens of millions of dollars from his earnings over the years. The sources characterize this period as a dangerous cocktail of a chaotic personal life and questionable professional relationships, which would directly contribute to the severe financial and legal problems that followed.
And then came the most devastating blow of all. In July 1991, while in Indianapolis for the Miss Black America pageant, Tyson was accused of raping Desiree Washington, an 18-year-old contestant. Tyson steadfastly maintained that the encounter was consensual.
A grand jury indicted him in September 1991. The ensuing trial captivated and deeply polarized the nation. On February 10, 1992, after a highly publicized trial, an Indiana jury found him guilty of 1 count of rape and 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct.
The sentencing followed on March 26, 1992. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, though some sources specify a 10-year sentence with 4 years suspended.
His appeals were denied at every level, and his conviction was affirmed. Subsequent post-conviction efforts also failed. Tyson was sent to prison, and his career as the reigning, albeit recently dethroned, boxing icon was abruptly completely halted.
He served his sentence at the Indiana Youth Center, a medium-security facility. He ultimately served 3 years, from March 1992 until his parole in March 1995. The sources describe this period as one of immense difficulty, but also, surprisingly, one of profound adjustment and unexpected transformation.
Yeah, prison was not easy. Despite his fame, his status made him a target for other inmates. He recounted facing constant threats, witnessing horrific events like sexual assaults, and having to maintain a constant vigilance, adopting a nip-it-in-the-bud philosophy, where any perceived slight had to be met with immediate force to establish dominance and deter further aggression. The sources mention him sometimes needing to carry makeshift weapons for protection.
But in this incredibly harsh environment, he also found a strange, paradoxical form of sanctuary.
Yes, the sources describe him finding solitary confinement cool, and even calling it his savior. This seems counterintuitive, but he explained it as a respite from the constant chaos and threats of the general population. It was a place where he was forced to be alone with his thoughts, allowing for introspection that had been impossible in his whirlwind life outside. For the first time, he had a structured environment, albeit a punitive one, and a forced pause that allowed for some level of internal processing.
It was also during his incarceration that Tyson converted to Islam, wasn't it?
That's right. The sources suggest this spiritual shift was part of that internal search for meaning and inner peace during a period of forced reflection. His primary focus, he said, became simply surviving each day without incident and serving his time so he could get out as quickly as possible.
Now, it's crucial to discuss how this trial and conviction were perceived publicly because it sparked an intense debate that fractured along significant societal lines.
Yes. The sources highlight that within the African American community, there was widespread skepticism about the fairness of the verdict. Many saw Tyson, despite his flaws, as a victim of a criminal justice system often perceived as being racially biased against black men.
Public opinion polls at the time showed a stark divide. A majority of black respondents questioned the fairness of the conviction, while a large percentage of white respondents believed he was guilty and deserved his sentence.
The sources, particularly citing analysis by Kevin D. Brown, also note the difficult position this put Desiree Washington in. Despite being the victim, she received surprisingly little support from some segments of the black community in Indianapolis, with the narrative often tragically shifting to portray Tyson as the one who was wronged or unfairly targeted.
Media coverage of the trial also came under scrutiny, with critics arguing it sometimes perpetuated subtle racist stereotypes in its portrayal of Tyson.
The sources emphasize that this case really transcended the specifics of the crime itself. It became a potent, complex cultural moment, a battleground for discussing deeply uncomfortable issues. Racial injustice within the legal system, the power dynamics between black men and black women, the influence of celebrity, and perceived failings of justice. It's vital to present this impartially, focusing on what the sources describe about these widespread perceptions, the resulting divides, and the societal tensions the case laid bare, without expressing our own judgment on the verdict itself.
So after serving 3 years in prison, Mike Tyson was released on parole in March 1995, and the world of boxing, and indeed the wider public, was buzzing with anticipation for his return.
The comeback fight was scheduled relatively quickly, on August 19, 1995, at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. It was a massive event, heavily promoted under the banner, "He's back." His opponent was Peter McNeely, a fighter with a decent record but largely an unknown quantity compared to Tyson's past opposition.
And the fight itself, well, it was memorable, but maybe not for the reasons people expected. Very short.
Extraordinarily brief and anticlimactic from a competitive standpoint. Tyson came out aggressively and simply overwhelmed McNeely from the opening bell, knocking him down twice in rapid succession. After the second knockdown, McNeely's manager, Vinny Vecchione, stepped into the ring to stop the fight, resulting in McNeely's disqualification just 89 seconds into the first round.
89 seconds. But despite its brevity, the financial success of that comeback was staggering.
Absolutely phenomenal. The event grossed an estimated $96 million and generated $63 million in pay-per-view revenue, setting a record at the time with 1.52 million buys. And Tyson himself commanded a massive $25 million purse for those 89 seconds of work.
Wow.
The sources highlight this as clear evidence that despite prison, despite the controversy, Mike Tyson remained a colossal must-see box office draw. His ability to generate revenue was undiminished.
With that immediate financial success, Tyson quickly focused on reclaiming his place at the top of the heavyweight division.
His next step was challenging for a major title. On March 16, 1996, he faced WBC champion Frank Bruno, a rematch from their 1989 bout. This time, the outcome was similar. Tyson was dominant, stopping Bruno by TKO in the third round to become a 2-time heavyweight champion. He earned another $30 million for that fight.
And later that year, he moved to acquire another belt. On September 7, 1996, he challenged Bruce Seldon for the WBA title.
This fight had a layer of controversy surrounding it. The sources note that Tyson and Don King reportedly paid Lennox Lewis, who was the mandatory challenger for the WBC belt. Tyson had just won $4 million to step aside. Tyson then vacated the WBC belt to fight Seldon instead.
Ah, okay. And the Seldon fight was even quicker than the Bruno rematch.
Yes, it ended in a knockout in just 1 minute and 49 seconds of the first round, netting Tyson another $30 million. However, this victory was widely criticized, with many in the audience chanting "fix" and accusing Seldon of taking a dive. This perception definitely cast a shadow on the legitimacy of Tyson's quick title wins.
And tragically, the night of the Seldon fight in Las Vegas is also infamous because Tupac Shakur, who attended the fight, was fatally shot hours later.
That's right, a very dark side note to that event.
So he's back, he's a 2-time champion, he's making massive money, but there are clouds gathering questionable opponents, controversial maneuvers outside the ring, accusations of dives. And this sets the stage for the big showdown that the boxing world was waiting for. Evander Holyfield.
Their first fight took place on November 9, 1996, with Tyson defending his WBA title. Holyfield, who many considered past his prime, delivered a masterful performance, surprising many by outboxing and outfighting Tyson throughout the bout.
It wasn't the expected Tyson demolition, though.
Not at all. Holyfield wore Tyson down and eventually stopped him by TKO in the 11th round. It was Tyson's second professional loss. He still earned a massive $30 million purse, but he lost his WBA title.
And then came the rematch on June 28, 1997, billed as The Sound and the Fury. This is the fight that would etch itself into infamy in sports history.
Oh, yeah. It descended into chaos and became one of the most bizarre events ever witnessed in a boxing ring. Tyson became increasingly frustrated during the fight, particularly by what he perceived as intentional headbutts from Holyfield that went uncalled.
Leading to
The bite. In the third round, during a clinch, Tyson, in a moment of apparent frustration and rage, bit Evander Holyfield on his right ear. He actually tore off a piece of the cartilage and spat it out onto the canvas.
absolutely unbelievable. What happened next? I mean, the chaos must have been immense.
It was. There was a chaotic delay. Referee Mills Lane initially decided to disqualify Tyson. But after confusion at ringside and intervention from boxing officials, the fight was allowed to continue after Tyson had a 2-point deduction. But moments later, incredibly, in another clinch, Tyson bit Holyfield again, this time on the left ear.
A second bite.
A second bite. And at that point, referee Mills Lane had no choice but to disqualify Tyson at the end of the third round.
The consequences must have been severe.
Oh, immediate and severe. The Nevada State Athletic Commission revoked Tyson's boxing license and fined him a staggering $3 million. The bite fight became a global headline, severely damaging his reputation, undoing any goodwill from his comeback, and showing that the volatile, self-destructive tendencies were still very much ingrained and capable of erupting in the most shocking ways.
After the Holyfield debacle, Tyson's career became increasingly sporadic, didn't it? Marked by continued legal issues and a clear decline in his abilities in the ring.
Yeah, his license was eventually reinstated, allowing him to fight again, but it was a different chapter. He had a KO win over Franz Botha in January 1999, but just a month later, he was sentenced to a year in jail for assaulting 2 motorists in a road rage incident that happened back in 1998. He served a few months of that sentence.
His erratic behavior outside and inside the ring continued.
Definitely. In June 2000, he kept punching Lou Savarese after the referee had stopped the fight, injuring the referee. An October 2000 win against Andrew Galata was later changed to a no contest after Tyson tested positive for marijuana.
And the long-awaited fight against Lennox Lewis, who is now the undisputed heavyweight champion, finally happened on June 8, 2002. The buildup was pretty infamous too, right?
Oh yeah, including a chaotic press conference brawl where Tyson bit Lewis on the leg, echoing the Holyfield incident.
In the fight itself.
Lewis was dominant, stopping Tyson by knockout in the 8th round. It was a decisive defeat against the top fighter of the era.
Tyson had his last professional win in February 2003, a quick 49-second KO, but the end was near.
Very near. He lost his next 2 fights. In July 2004, he lost to Danny Williams, and then in June 2005, in what would be his final professional bout, he lost to Kevin McBride, quitting on a stool after the 6th round.
And he announced his retirement after the loss to McBride. The fighting career that had begun with such explosive power and promise ended not really with a bang, but with a whimper.
And running parallel to his boxing decline was the astonishing implosion of his finances. Despite earning an estimated $400 million to $500 billion during his career, figures that are almost incomprehensible, he filed for bankruptcy in August 2003, claiming $23 million in debts.
It's the question everyone asks: how do you earn $500 million and end up broke?
The sources detail a perfect storm of factors. Firstly, an incredibly lavish, uncontrolled lifestyle. We're talking multiple mansions, an armada of luxury cars, expensive jewelry, including a reported $2.2 million gold bathtub. And then there were the exotic pets, those 3 Bengal tigers that cost $70,000 each initially and required $200,000 a year just for upkeep.
Tigers. Just the upkeep alone is more than most people earn in a year. It's mind-boggling.
It really is. Secondly, the alleged financial mismanagement by Don King, who Tyson later claimed systematically siphoned off tens of millions through convoluted deals and expenses. And thirdly, costly divorce settlements, particularly from his tumultuous marriage to Robin Givens.
This financial collapse, the sources note, is a stark and tragic illustration. Immense wealth acquired incredibly quickly by someone who came from deep poverty, without financial literacy, and crucially, without trustworthy guidance after the loss of Cus D'Amato, was utterly squandered through a combination of personal recklessness and external exploitation.
It really serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of sudden wealth and the lack of preparedness for managing it. It's a stark contrast to the Forbes report in 1995 that listed him as having $0 in endorsement income during his incarceration. Even that revenue stream had dried up completely.
But the story of Mike Tyson doesn't end with bankruptcy and retirement from boxing. In fact, he embarked on a truly surprising and compelling journey of reinvention outside the ring. A major part of this was his venture into theater and literature with Mike Tyson, Undisputed Truth.
Yeah, this wasn't just a standard celebrity memoir. It was a one-man stage show directed by none other than Spike Lee and written by his third wife, Lakeith Kiki Spicer. It premiered on Broadway in 2012.
And the content was remarkably raw, wasn't it? Brutally candid and often unexpectedly humorous.
Exactly. He chronicled his entire life story on stage, the difficult childhood, the boxing rise and fall, the conviction and prison time, his struggles with addiction, and his path towards sobriety and self-understanding. The sources highlight this show, and the subsequent memoir, as a deliberate, conscious effort by Tyson to take control of his own narrative after decades of being defined and often caricatured by sensationalized media portrayals.
Spike Lee later adapted the stage show into a successful HBO special that aired in 2013.
Right. And the memoir, also titled Undisputed Truth and co-authored, was published in 2013. It delved even deeper, offering unflinching accounts of his experiences with poverty, fame, violence, addiction, and his complex relationships, including very scathing perspectives on Robert Gibbons and Don King. It also touched on his time in prison, his discovery of reading, his conversion to Islam, and his search for a more tranquil philosophical outlook.
The reception to both the stage show and the book was largely positive, wasn't it? Critics and audiences alike praised his honesty, his vulnerability, and his surprising capacity for comedic timing, something the public had rarely seen from the intimidating Iron Mike.
Absolutely. The sources emphasize that this project was absolutely instrumental in humanizing a figure who has long been perceived as almost monstrous or solely defined by his violence and controversies. It allowed audiences to connect with the complexities, the pain, and the struggles behind the headlines. This act of narrative ownership fundamentally shifted public perception for many people.
He also smartly leveraged his enduring fame, even if controversial, to carve out a successful niche in the entertainment world. Movie and TV cameos became frequent, often playing a caricatured version of himself, sort of leaning into the public's perception.
His appearances were often memorable. He had a cameo in Rocky Balboa in 2006, and then famously stole scenes in The Hangover in 2009 and its sequel. The Hangover cameo, where he air drums to Phil Collins and demands the return of his tiger, showcased that surprising comedic sensibility to a whole new generation.
Right, and the sources even note that Tyson admitted taking the role partly to fund a drug habit at the time, which is another layer of that raw honesty he embraced later.
Yeah, exactly. He had guest roles in shows like Entourage, played a death row inmate in Law & Order, SVU, appeared on How I Met Your Mother, and even voiced himself in the quirky animated parody series Mike Tyson Mysteries, which ran from 2014 to 2020.
He also maintained a connection with professional wrestling, appearing notably for WWE, including as a special outside enforcer for the main event of WrestleMania 14 in 1998, a significant crossover moment between boxing and wrestling. He was later inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2012.
These diverse ventures clearly demonstrated his successful transition into a multifaceted entertainment personality, comfortable in front of cameras outside the boxing ring.
And perhaps one of the most significant components of his post-boxing reinvention, and one that truly reshaped his public image in recent years, is his podcast, Hot Boxin' with Mike Tyson.
Launched around January 2019, this became a phenomenon. It's characterized by long-form, incredibly candid conversations with a wide array of diverse guests, often while partaking in cannabis, which became a central defining element of the show and his rebranded persona.
The guest list was just a who's who across sports, entertainment, and culture. Canelo Alvarez, Sugar Ray Leonard, Dana White, Joe Rogan, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Kevin Hart, Cat Williams, Eminem, Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, Bill Maher, Ric Flair, and many, many more.
And the discussions were wide-ranging and deep, touching on personal experiences, the nature of celebrity, mental health, spirituality, addiction and recovery, social issues, business, and of course, cannabis culture. The show was widely praised for its raw, intimate, and often surprisingly profound discussions.
As a host, Tyson was disarmingly honest, vulnerable, curious, and open, which fostered a similar openness in his guests, didn't it?
It really did. The sources strongly credit Hot Boxin' as being absolutely crucial in further humanizing him to a vast audience. It showcased a side rarely seen during his fighting days, an introspective, thoughtful, even philosophical individual grappling with his past and seeking understanding. His willingness to embrace his undisputed truth, including all his flaws and struggles, became a unique part of his brand, making him relatable and even endearing to many who had previously only seen the intimidating fighter or the tabloid headlines.
And while the main run reportedly concluded in April 2024, related content appeared later so the brand might continue.
Yeah, the main run with Rick Ross as the final guest reportedly ended then, but related content under the Hotbox and Presents banner appeared later in 2024, suggesting the format or brand might continue in some form, and the archive alone remains immensely popular.
Beyond media and entertainment, he's also demonstrated a newfound business acumen, particularly in the rapidly growing cannabis industry.
This is arguably his most prominent entrepreneurial success. In 2016, he launched Tyson Ranch, envisioned as a 40-acre farm and resort focused on cannabis. This was later rebranded in 2021 as Tyson 2.0.
And this is definitely not a small niche operation. It's become quite big.
Far from it. Tyson 2.0 has become a significant player in the industry, offering a range of products including flower, pre-rolls, and edibles, notably including the famous Mike Bites ear-shaped gummies, sometimes even in collaborative packaging with Evander Holyfield.
Which is just incredible, turning perhaps the most infamous moment of his career into a lucrative, self-deprecating product.
Exactly. It's quite something. The sources cite impressive financial success, with reported revenues growing substantially, from $50 million in 2022 to a reported $160 million in 2023. The company has expanded across numerous states in the U.S. and internationally.
So he's managed to monetize his lifestyle and history, reframing his public association with cannabis use into a business venture aligned with wellness and entrepreneurship. It's a shrewd business move linked directly to his personal narrative.
Very much so. He also announced the Legends Only League in 2020, aimed at providing a platform for retired iconic athletes. His exhibition fight against Roy Jones Jr. was held under this banner. However, the sources for 2024-2025 are sparse on concrete information regarding the ongoing status or future events for the league itself.
And importantly, after being at $0 endorsement income according to Forbes in 1995, he successfully rebuilt his endorsement portfolio.
Absolutely. He's partnered with brands like Black Energy, Smart Cups, Mike's Hard Lemonade, Manscaped, and Copper Gel. The sources highlight this return to significant endorsement deals as a clear sign of his substantial commercial rehabilitation and the enduring appeal of his brand, albeit a very different brand than Iron Mike.
And speaking of returning to the ring, he did step back in for an exhibition bout a few years ago.
Yes, on November 28, 2020, at the age of 54, he had an 8-round exhibition fight against 51-year-old Roy Jones Jr. It was sanctioned by the California Commission and ended in an unofficial draw, though many observers felt Tyson showed flashes of his old self and arguably had the better of the exchanges.
Commercially, it was a huge success.
Massive. The pay-per-view reportedly sold over 1.6 million buys, generating significant revenue. Tyson's purse alone was reported to be around $10 million for the exhibition. The sources point to this fight as demonstrating his enduring drawing power and connection to the sport, setting a precedent for late-career appearances that could generate substantial income.
Which brings us right up to Mike Tyson today, operating in 2024 and looking towards 2025. The big news, of course, was the Jake Paul fight.
This was a highly publicized and for many quite controversial event, his return to professional boxing at the age of 58. His opponent was 27-year-old Jake Paul, the social media personality who has transitioned into a professional boxer. The fight was sanctioned as a professional bout for 8 rounds and took place on November 15, 2024, at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. Notably, it was streamed globally on Netflix, representing a significant convergence of traditional sports spectacle and digital media platforms.
It was originally scheduled for July, but was postponed because Tyson suffered an ulcer flare-up during a flight, wasn't it?
That's right. The outcome was a unanimous decision win for Jake Paul, with scorecards reading 80-72, 79-73, and 79-73. Punch stats from the fight showed Paul landing significantly more, connecting on 78 of 278 punches thrown, 28%, compared to Tyson's 18 of 97, 18%.
Accounts from the fight noted that Tyson showed flashes of his old aggressive style early on, but visibly struggled with the pace and mobility as the rounds wore on. He clearly appeared his age in the ring, with limited neck movement and reportedly sporting a leg brace during the bout.
Yeah, and Jake Paul, despite securing the win, did not get the knockout he perhaps sought, and is reported to have commented after the fight that he didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt.
But regardless of the competitive outcome or concerns about the matchup, the viewership numbers were absolutely massive.
Unbelievable. Sources cite record-breaking figures, including reportedly 65 million concurrent viewers and a total of 180 million views for the fight on
As
Netflix.
Tyson's financial gain was significant, with his purse reported to be between $20 million and $40 million for the fight.
Yet the significance here, according to the sources, is that it unequivocally underscored Mike Tyson's enduring value as a spectacle. His presence alone guarantees global attention and massive revenue, almost regardless of his competitive form or the ethical questions surrounding the matchup.
And thanks in large part to recent fight paydays like the Jake Paul bout and the continued success of his business ventures, his net worth has seen a significant resurgence.
Yes, estimated by sources to be between $20 million and $50 million by early 2025. The Jake Paul fight earnings were a crucial driver of this financial recovery after his bankruptcy years.
His primary business focus continues to be Tyson 2.0, the cannabis company.
Exactly. It remains a major source of income, continuing its expansion across states and internationally, generating significant annual revenues in the tens to hundreds of millions, as cited in the sources.
And his income streams also include his back catalog, like the popular Hotbox and podcast archives, and a growing list of endorsements.
Yes. Partnerships with brands like Smart Cups, Mike's Hard Lemonade, Manscaped, and Coppergel are cited. The sources point to his reported purchases in early 2025 of a $13 million waterfront estate in Palm Beach, Florida, and land for a private jet costing $1.69 million. This indicates a return to a more lavish lifestyle, the one hopes, as the sources imply, managed with perhaps more financial prudence this time around, having learned hard lessons from past bankruptcy.
His public persona also seems to be evolving, particularly as he approaches his 60s. Recent interviews, such as one with Men's Health UK in April 2025, paint a picture of increasing introspection.
He's candid about the realities of aging, stating that age brings out either the worst in you or the best. Which one? You have to choose. He's also very open about his mental health journey, acknowledging that he still has struggles, but has developed better tools and understands his triggers and why I self-sabotage. He champions open dialogue about mental health, especially for men, but also cautions against using it as an excuse, emphasizing the need for active work and self-awareness.
It sounds like he's embracing self-care in ways he might not have before. Massages, pedicures.
Absolutely. His lifestyle now reportedly includes things like skincare routines, pedicures, and massages. He also maintains a daily workout regimen, performing hundreds of reps for shoulders, abs, and sit-ups, viewing training not just for physical fitness, but as crucial for longevity and mental well-being. This public portrayal suggests a man actively grappling with his past, seeking peace, and sharing lessons learned from a life lived at the most extreme ends of the spectrum.
So what's next for Mike Tyson in the latter part of 2024 and heading into 2025? Does he stay active?
He remains publicly active. In June 2025, the sources mention he participated in an event at the Arizona State Capitol, launching a youth fitness challenge, invited likely due to his global recognition and his stated dedication to fitness and education.
And there's still speculation swirling about more fighting, isn't there?
Yes. As of May 2025, reports indicated he was being courted for a potential bout against 48-year-old MMA legend Fedor Emelianenko, possibly targeted for December 2025. However, the sources emphasize this fight is far from confirmed, and significant health and age concerns continue to lead many to hope he stays retired. There's no significant discussion currently regarding a rematch against Jake Paul.
And the podcast status. Still a bit unclear.
As mentioned, the main run of Hotboxing concluded in April 2024, but related content appeared later in the year. The future of his dedicated podcasting is somewhat unclear based on the sources, but the extensive archive remains popular and accessible.
Mike Tyson's current image, then, is this complex blend. An elder statesman seemingly sharing wisdom and grappling with introspection, yet still undeniably drawn to the spectacle and financial opportunities of the fight game. It's a tension.
It is. The sources note this tension continues to define his ongoing narrative, and his successful Tyson 2.0 cannabis venture is deeply intertwined with this persona. It's not just a business, it's symbiotically linked to his narrative of finding peace and managing trauma, shrewdly aligning his brand with a lucrative market that values authenticity and personal journey.
Mike Tyson's journey is truly one lived at the most dramatic extremes imaginable. From the brutal, unstable streets of Brownsville through the meteoric rise to become the youngest heavyweight champion, the devastating fall, incarceration, financial ruin, and then this multifaceted, surprising reinvention.
It's a relentless interplay of raw talent meeting deep trauma, moments of triumph, juxtaposed with profound flaws, exploitation alongside surprising resilience. The sources consistently remind us that the man who instilled fear with every punch was also capable of deep vulnerability, with shocking public violence existing alongside moments of quiet introspection and a struggle for peace, particularly in his later years.
His impact is just undeniable, isn't it? Not only on the sport of boxing, changing the game with his explosive power and formidable persona, but also on pop culture, cementing himself as a global icon whose story resonates far beyond sports fans.
His life serves as a potent cautionary tale about the dangers of fame and fortune hitting an ill-equipped young person, the lasting impact of childhood trauma, and the corrosive nature of unchecked power and exploitation. But it's also, in its later chapters, a testament to human resilience, the capacity for self-reflection, and the difficult, ongoing struggle for redemption and inner peace.
He absolutely defies simple labels like hero or villain. His story embodies the uncomfortable truth that individuals can be capable of both immense greatness and profound error, inspiring both awe and, at times, revulsion.
His enduring hold on the public imagination likely stems precisely from this complexity and contradiction. His life story, with all its peaks and valleys, acts as a kind of mirror for society's own fascinations with power, violence, downfall, and the possibility of redemption. And the controversies that have surrounded him throughout his life, dealing with issues of race, gender, justice, and ethics, reflect unresolved societal tensions that his story forces us to confront.
Despite his deliberate efforts to present his undisputed truth on his own terms through his shows and podcasts, his legacy remains dynamic, debated, and open to interpretation as this truly remarkable, turbulent saga continues to unfold before our eyes.
Here's a thought to leave you with. Considering the entire arc of his journey, from the explosive rage unlocked by the killing of a pigeon in Brooklyn, to the quiet introspection shared on a popular podcast, and culminating in the spectacle of a sanctioned professional comeback fight at the age of 58, how much of Mike Tyson's life was fundamentally driven by the relentless external pressures of his environment and circumstances, and how much by an unyielding internal force, perhaps born of that early trauma, that simply had to fight, whether it was inside the ring against his demons or simply for relevance and peace outside of it.